What is going on, everybody? Welcome to a special video. This is something I've been meaning to do for a couple weeks now, so I'm excited to bring to you guys my 3-year NFL power rankings. Before we get into it, I want to kind of preface why I want to do this video and what my sort of qualifiers are for these rankings. So this is something that's popped up from a lot of discussions that either I've had or you're hearing on podcasts or whatever about how the NFL has really changed. We're seeing more mid-season trades. We saw Khalil Mack get traded, Amari Cooper. We're seeing teams with quarterbacks on rookie contracts looking to capitalize on a specific window and really going all in on certain years. This year we saw Minnesota, the Rams, the Eagles. These guys were all super aggressive. And while the fans of these teams might not want to admit it, but trading away draft capital and loading up on or getting rid of cap space down the road is going to have repercussions. So I want to use this video to kind of talk about how the landscape might change over 3 years. The 3-year power ranking, it's not just who's going to be the best team in 3 years. This is going to be who's going to win the most games over 3 years. And maybe kind of as we head into the playoffs of 2022, what might the power rankings look like? And this is going to obviously be very opinionated. I'm not doing any kind of analytical thing here, kind of like I did with my preseason power rankings where I broke down specific grades by position and gave a number grade for every team. I am going to give a letter grade for my 4 qualifiers here that I'll talk about, but I do ask that you don't really focus on those. You might notice that, 32 actually graded out better across the board, but they ranked below the 25th team or whatever. That's not the point of those grades. I just want to give a quick, snapshot of where I view them by my 4 grades, but I really don't want to talk to anyone in the comments that are just, being nitpicking, like, oh, how can you put them, C, C, D, D when they're ranked below another team that graded out worse, like whatever. That's not the point here. So the qualifiers here, we've got quarterback, obviously super important. We're seeing with Jacksonville, it just, you can't have a sustainable run over 3 years without that elite quarterback. You can have 1, maybe 2 years of just fantastic health and good coaching and a good roster, and you can have a good year or two, but over 3 years, and, some teams that don't have, fans of teams that don't have that quarterback are going to argue against this, but the history just tells everything you need to know. You just need to have an elite quarterback if you want sustained success in this league. You can win a Super Bowl. You can put together a great roster, but if you want to talk about a 3 to 5 year window or whatever, you got to have that elite quarterback. You just, with the salary cap these days, you cannot sustain success without that quarterback, and let Jacksonville prove everything you need to know about that. And then you've got teams as well that have those elite quarterbacks that don't have the roster talent. Seattle's is right in there. Even Green Bay has had probably more success than you could argue with the talent around there. So that quarterback's important. And then coach and culture. This is super important, probably just as important as that quarterback, especially if you can have that elite coach, your Sean McVay, Andy Reid, Sean Payton, these innovative coaches that are going to stay up to date with the way the modern NFL is changing. Obviously super important. Front office, this is going to get a grade basically how much I trust these front offices to make the right moves. Some are more conservative, some are more aggressive, some are better drafters, some maybe not so much. The front office thing, it can be a little bit of luck, but for the most part, there are just better front offices than others, in my opinion. And then you've got the state of the roster. This is really important, and this isn't just, is this team good now, though that does play a factor. This is basically how good do I think the roster could be in 3 years. And it's how much draft capital do you have, how much cap space do you have, who's on your team that's young, who's on your team that's under contract, are you going to be losing free agents? Like the Bears, for example, great roster, and all their guys are under contract, so that's not really going to change. But if you're a team maybe like Philadelphia, who has really good talent on their roster, but some of these contracts are coming up, they're a little older, that's going to grade out worse than, say, Chicago, who is kind of locked in for the next 2 or 3 years. So those are the qualifiers. Let's get right into it here. Starting at number 32, we've got the Washington Redskins. This is arguable, but maybe this one's just recency bias. I'm trying to eliminate recency bias from these rankings. But the Alex Smith news is really bad right now, and it could turn around, but I have a really hard time seeing Alex Smith playing even at his level next year. And say what you want about Alex Smith, but he's not an elite quarterback. Even a healthy Alex Smith, you're probably looking at a C here at quarterback, maybe a C+. But with the leg injury, There's talk about he might lose his leg, and I hope that doesn't happen. I like Alex Smith, but the fact of the matter is Washington is in a really weird spot right now, and their roster's fine. Like, they've got some good players on defense, but it's just trending downwards fast for Washington. And the rest of the organization has kind of been up and down over the last 5 years. And I don't know how much I trust them to really get this thing on the right path. So I think Washington is set for a rough couple of years here. So that's why they're going to come in at 32. And then 31 here, we've got the Jacksonville Jaguars. This really just comes back to the quarterback and the fact that their roster was built for last year. We talk about windows. Their window was last year. They may have had a window this year if they didn't if they weren't so stubborn about Blake Bortles. But they're going to have a hard time finding a quarterback. This draft is not a good quarterback class. Like, maybe they signed Teddy Bridgewater or whatever, but the offense is not going to be good for the next 3 years. I don't know how long they're going to keep their coach around. And then this defense is getting older. They don't have cap space. Like, it's just, I think this thing's going to fall apart in Jacksonville. They had their chance, but I do not see this being very good over the next few years. And then number 30, the Arizona Cardinals. So this all starts with Josh Rosen and his development, but that's only going to happen if they can get the right coaches around him and the right offensive talent. I do believe Josh Rosen can be a good quarterback in this league. I think he can be that Matt Ryan, Jared Goff system quarterback type, but they just don't have nearly the talent around Josh Rosen that teams like Atlanta and the Rams have put around those quarterbacks. So they've got to go to work. They've got to bring in some more receivers. I like Christian Kirk. This offensive line stinks. And his front office has really done a pretty poor job, I think, maintaining youth, as this was like 3 years ago. This team had their window like 3 years ago, but they've had a really hard time sort of hitting that reset button. Once you have that window, I think it's really important to recognize that you're not going to win. And then try to build up that roster for 2-3 years down the road. And Arizona's been in that state for the last year or two, and they've done a kind of a poor job surrounding this young quarterback with talent, because it really is all about developing a young quarterback and making that offense run through a quarterback. So number 29, the Denver Broncos. And they're kind of hanging around there, but they did just suffer some pretty bad injuries, and it's unfortunate because this team had a window to make the playoffs this year. I still think they could be solid next year. You got Case Keenum in there. I think he was on a 2-year deal, so he should be back next year as the quarterback. And he's actually been kind of a relief for them. He's been a serviceable quarterback. And you've got some young receivers here. The offensive line has some young guys, but they got a lot of work to do on that line. But the defense is what concerns me, because Chris Harris suffering a significant injury this year. He was already getting older. You already lost to Talib. The safety duos with Stewart and Ward of their great defense is gone. Von Miller's not getting any younger. This defense is going to have a hard time maintaining that sort of, not going to say elite level, but a team that can almost be carried by its defense at times. So this team's got a lot of work to do, and you don't have that elite quarterback to kind of carry things. So 29 for the Broncos. Number 28, the Miami Dolphins. And this is kind of a rough ranking because I do think the Dolphins, over the next 3 years, will win more games than 27 other teams or whatever. I don't know if I said that right, but you know what I mean. They're going to win some games, just like they do this year. I like Adam Gase, and they're kind of in this purgatory, and that's why they come in a little lower. I don't see them moving on from Ryan Tannehill, to be honest. The quarterback crop this year is just not very good. They've done enough with Tannehill to kind of keep him, but I think that's a mistake. I think this team has tried to retool around Tannehill as opposed to rebuilding with a different quarterback, and I think long-term, that's a poor decision, even if it buys you more wins on the front end, kind of like we're seeing this year. So they're fine. Their defense actually is probably going to keep getting better, but I just don't trust this offense to be much better than it is this year as long as Ryan Tannehill's their quarterback. And then the Detroit Lions here at number 27. Stafford's concerned me this year. He seems to have regressed a little bit, just for whatever reason. Same offensive coordinator, but they just can't get things going offensively. I think the Golden Tate loss hurts them. Still kind of mind-boggling how they can't develop any offensive linemen, because you look at their roster on paper and they got a lot of talent there. They just can't really get a lot of production from that offensive line. The defense will continue to improve as Matt Patricia kind of molds this to what he wants to do. They've got some nice young players, especially on that front. But just overall, it's kind of a flat team. And I just have a hard time seeing them really turning into like a playoff contending team. And that's really all I can say about the Lions. Number 26, the New York Jets. This is an interesting one because they are going to have basically free reign to blow this thing up and try to get Sam Darnold to be a good quarterback as early as next year. Obviously, the roster is a mess. You might be moving on from Coach Bowles. I don't know. I think Bowles is a good defensive coach, but you need to get someone that is offensive-minded here to help develop Darnold. And if that means firing your coach to do that in order to convince a good offensive mind to come to New York, then you have to do that. If you like a coordinator enough to do that, then go for it. But they also just need to build up the weapons on offense, whether it's the offensive line, which, yes, is a weapon, and the receivers and the running game. Like I think Le'Veon Bell would be a great signing here for the Jets. I think Le'Veon is a guy that wouldn't mind playing in New York under those lights. So I think they've got the some good flexibility to build this roster. That's why they do come in a little bit higher here. You've got some honestly superstars on the defensive side of the ball. Jamal Adams, already one of the best players in the secondary in the NFL. My big question is going to be the coach and the culture and trusting that front office to do all this stuff. But they really do have a clear runway to kind of build around Sam Darnold now. And then number 25, the Oakland Raiders, who are in absolute rebuild mode. And the thing is with John Gruden, like I'm not entirely sure he's a bad offensive coach. Like I think he's actually, I would rank him at least in the top 20 in terms of coaches, like on-field coaches. He's a terrible general manager, and we'll see if he can prove me wrong and draft well as we move forward. That is definitely a concern for me. But talk about open slates. Like this team's going to have cap space. They're going to have draft picks, as we saw with my Raiders rebuild series. We had a lot of room to bring in free agents and draft and really load up this roster and maybe get Derek Carr back to playing at that. I don't think he'll ever get back to playing at an MVP level, but I do think Derek Carr is good enough. And now that he's kind of under contract, signed a few years ago, his cap hit's not going to be the worst if you can get him back to playing at an above average level. So they've got an open runway. It's going to be a total wait and see thing here. I kind of believe in it, but I also have my doubts about their ability to build a roster here. Just the value that they got for Khalil Mack is a travesty. And the way they handled that trade, it does make me lose faith in that front office. So moving on, number 24, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So the quarterback situation is obviously a talking point here. Is it Jameis Winston? I do think Jameis is back next year. Is he the starter? Probably. I think Tampa is going to be smart enough to bring in somebody to compete. I don't know who it's going to be. Is that going to be a Teddy Bridgewater type? Is it as low as I think Chase Daniel's still under contract in Chicago, but is it going to be someone like that who's going to come in and you say it's an open competition? Whatever it is, you need to push Jameis. He has turned things around a little bit in the last couple weeks and has shown some signs. And this team has a ton of offensive talent. I think, if anything, they could use a good running back. I thought the Ronald Jones pick was terrible. Their draft in general has made me lose faith in this front office. Like, I've been really hard on the Vita Vea pick. I thought the Ronald Jones pick was a joke when they made it. So they got to prove that they can draft better. But I do like the direction this offense is headed in, just in terms of the talent they have there. It might be the best receiving corps in the NFL. But this is just a team that's had a really hard time turning that corner. We've had confidence in them in the past to kind of do that, and over the last 15 years they've never been able to do that. So I don't think that's really going to change now. And then we got the New York Giants, number 23, and this just starts with the quarterback. It was hard on them for taking Saquon Barkley when they did, and I still, even though I think Saquon Barkley is the best running back in the NFL, and I will stand by that, I still think it was a mistake to take him over either Sam Darnold or Josh Allen. I think their future is looking brighter with either of those guys. And I don't know how the hell they're going to get a quarterback here, because it's not Eli Manning. That much is clear. But at this point, are they going to stick with him for another year? Like, come on. It's time to move on. They should have done it when they had a high pick, when they had good quarterbacks available. But now they're going to be looking at, like a top 12 pick in a bad quarterback class. And that was why I was so hard on the Barkley pick. I mean, the rest of it, like, is Shermer a good coach? He's probably fine. Like, I think they'll stick with him. He's done some nice things with this offense, given how bad that offensive line is and how bad Eli is. The front office, they've drafted well in spots. Like, the organization is fine. Like, the Giants have a nice culture, and if they had that elite quarterback, I think they could really be on the up and up. But that's just not how I feel about them, unfortunately. And then number 22, the Cincinnati Bengals. So this team has some good youth. They've drafted well the last couple of years, really. You know, Carl Lawson, they get the safety, Jesse Bates, Tyler Boyd has come along, Joe Mixon. Like, they've done a good job bringing in talent, which is what they need to do. But they are just stuck in absolute purgatory. And we'll see what they do this offseason if they move on from Andy Dalton and move on from this coaching staff. But until you got Dalton, you're going to have a certain ceiling where everything really needs to be perfect. And this team had a good window, actually, in like 2015. I think it was. I thought this team was Super Bowl bound. Like, they had just a loaded roster. But now some of those stars, AJ Green, Geno Atkins, even Carlos Dunlap, they're getting older. Vontaze Burfict has been terrible. And, you know, you still have kind of a so-so quarterback. So the Bengals, I would say, are going to hang around kind of in the middle of the NFL until they prove otherwise, that they're not stuck in purgatory. Then number 21, this is a bit of a surprise, the Minnesota Vikings. The thing is, this team went all in, and we're seeing things fall apart. And, you know, I thought the Kirk Cousins signing was fine when they did it. I thought that was the best move they could have made to be all in, and it was the best quarterback they could have had. The problem is, like, if you aren't going to address this offensive line and acknowledge, you know, this is kind of like the Jaguars with Blake Bortles. Like, you need to identify your problems and have self-awareness. Like, this offensive line overachieved last year because of what they were able to do with Case Keenum moving the pocket and booting the pocket outside. But if you're going to bring in Kirk Cousins, you know you can't do that kind of stuff because he's not as mobile. He's got to be sitting in the pocket and have a little extra time to throw. And if you're going to sign Kirk Cousins, you have to address this offensive line, and they didn't. They draft a corner in the first round. They don't sign anyone. Instead, they sign a defensive tackle in Sheldon Rankins instead of bringing in a guard or a tackle. So the front office has done a really bad job here the last year with kind of self-awareness, and the defense is getting older. Like, you've got Everson Griffin. I'm not sure he's ever going to be an elite pass rusher again. I'm not sure he's ever going to be a number 2 pass rusher again. He's been really bad since he came back from his cocaine incident. And then you got, like, Linval Joseph's getting older. Harrison Smith's getting older. I don't know if Anthony Barr is going to be with this team next year. They're out of cap space. Like, this was their window this year, and maybe next year they're going to have a little bit of a window, but this team is going to fall apart, in my opinion. You just don't have an infrastructure here that is built to last, because Kirk Cousins, fine, but you don't have any offensive line. You're not going to be picking high. You got no cap space. So this thing is, in like 2 years or so, going to be looking pretty bad, in my opinion. And then number 20 here, the Pittsburgh Steelers. We're seeing this year this team on the decline. And you could say this is recency bias with them losing to the Raiders. Well, I actually put this list together before this weekend, and this was just another microcosm of how this team is falling apart. Like, I whipped out the stat of, you know, only 11 teams in so many years, like 65 games that were double-digit underdogs on the road. Only 11 have lost, and 4 of those were Mike Tomlin Steelers teams. So I don't know how much longer Mike Tomlin's going to be around. I don't know how much longer Big Ben is going to be around, who already hinted at retirement, just got hurt again, which has been a trend with him where he gets these little nagging injuries that just add up over time. Antonio Brown is, 30, 31. Le'Veon Bell is gone. The offensive line is getting older. That is really a critical piece for this team's success. So this is another team that is just going to have to kind of miraculously bring youth in at critical positions. I don't think Mason Rudolph is the answer, to be honest. So this team, they're going to have to milk whatever they can out of what they have left, or bring in a bunch of youth, and it's just a hard thing to do. So 20 for the Steelers. And then number 19, the Carolina Panthers. It's just kind of an average team as you look forward. Like, Cam is a slightly above average quarterback. You've got Luke Kuechly on the defensive side of the ball, but the defense has a ton of holes. It's really just K1 Short and Luke Kuechly if you're talking about a 3-year projection. Everyone else is kind of replacement level, in my opinion. I'm sorry if I'm forgetting anyone. Shaq Thompson maybe? I don't know. The front office has been fine. Like, they've drafted okay, I guess. And you do have some youth at the tackles that are injured this year. So maybe they can turn this thing around and just really spark some things. But I think they're just going to kind of exist as a wild card competitor. Maybe if teams in their division fall off, they can win the division. Like, I'm not trying to rip the Panthers apart, but I just don't see a super high ceiling for this team over the next 3 years. And then number 18, the Buffalo Bills. So I'm buying into this team. Josh Allen, right now he's a lot of fun to watch, but as a thrower, he's got to develop. My big thing here is with Buffalo is I actually trust the coaching and the culture in the front office here to do that. Whereas I don't know how much I trust that with like the Jets or the Cardinals, who haven't really proved that. I mean, the Bills, this is a team that completely overachieved the year before. They made the playoffs with Tyrod Taylor. They've turned consistently just kind of average roster talent into really good defenses. And offensively, when they've had Josh Allen this year, with like Robert Foster at wide receiver and Isaiah McKenzie, who's like 5'7" and one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL, and an injured LaShawn McCoy, like, they've been able to score some points. Like, they went in and beat the Vikings 27-0 on the road. So I think Buffalo is actually going to be able to have a good offseason, enter next year with a lot of momentum, and put some nice things around Josh Allen, who, frankly, going back to his Wyoming days, has never had a solid system around him with good talent and good coaching. So I have some faith in Buffalo. I have faith in Josh Allen. He just has all the talent. Like, he's not inaccurate, which was a big concern for a lot of people. I never had that concern with him. He's not extremely decisive, but I think that's a trait you can grow. When you have that arm talent, when you have the accuracy, when you have the mobility. So it's going to be a big year for the Bills next year in terms of this quarterback picture. But the rest of the team, I like what they have going on in Buffalo. Like, they have a very good identity, and that says a lot. So number 17, the Tennessee Titans. This is a team that's still learning their identity. Marcus Mariota is fine. He's basically Alex Smith. I kind of like Coach Vrabel, but it is an offensive-driven league, and I think the offensive coaches more often are going to win out. So this is a fine roster. They don't have a lot of superstars, which concerns me. Like, it's just a hard team to talk about, man. They don't have a lot of talking points. Like, they're fine. That's really what it comes down to, but they don't have a lot of high upside, honestly.